I'm at the end of my second week learning some analog photography. So far I've had a chance to really practice using the camera, taking some photographs, and I even got to visit Jen's darkroom last week to develop my first few photos. Other than that, I've been practicing taking some photographs outside as well as inside, and I've been trying to really understand the exposure triangle. So the exposure triangle is a term that photographers use to help understand the exposure of a photograph. It encompasses the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO. The aperture measures how open or closed the lens is. A wider aperture will let in more light and it will have a lower f-stop number on the camera. A narrower aperture lets less light in and will therefore have a higher f-stop number. Now, the reason we care about our aperture is because it helps to determine the depth of field or how much detail we're able to see. When the aperture has a lower f-stop and is therefore wider and letting more light in, the depth of field is narrower. This works great for things like portraits where you want to isolate the subject and blur the background. If you want a wider depth of field that shows a lot more detail in the foreground, middle ground, and background, then you'll want a narrower aperture and a higher f-stop. The camera that I'm using is stuck at an aperture of 2.8, which is about in the middle, so I'm able to focus on a single subject, but still get some visual information from the background as well. Now, the ISO refers to the film, or in my case, the paper's, sensitivity to light. My photo paper didn't specifically state its ISO, but it's generally around a 5 or a 6, so I went with the lowest ISO option on my light meter app, which is a 6. Since the aperture and ISO are in this case predetermined for me, the main element I need to pay attention to is the shutter speed, which is a measure of how long the shutter stays open to let light in. This is where my light meter app comes into play. When I've decided on a subject or scene I'd like to photograph, I set the ISO to 6 and aperture to 2.8, and then hold my phone up to let it measure the light and suggest a shutter speed for me. From there, I'm able to set the shutter speed, cock the shutter, and take the photograph.